She was 17 cents short. The elderly woman fumbled through her purse, her weathered hands shaking slightly as she counted the coins one more time. The line behind her grew longer. Someone sighed loudly. Another customer checked their phone with obvious irritation. You've been there, haven't you? Standing behind someone who can't find exact change while your lunch break ticks away. The cashier, a young woman named Maria, watched quietly. She'd been working at this small grocery store for 3 years. Minimum wage, no benefits. The kind of job people say you should be grateful to have. But Maria saw something others missed. She saw the way the elderly woman's eyes darted nervously. She saw the careful way she'd selected each item, the smallest loaf of bread, the single apple, the discounted soup can with a dented edge. Don't worry about it, Maria said softly, reaching into her own pocket. She pulled out a handful of change and added 17 cents to the register. The elderly woman's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, dear. I'll pay you back next time. Maria just smiled. It's okay, really. What Maria didn't know was that 3 people behind in line, a man in a worn baseball cap, was watching everything. He wasn't checking his phone. He wasn't sighing with impatience. He was taking mental notes. Because sometimes the universe has a peculiar way of placing the right people in the right moments. Have you ever wondered why some people give when they have so little? Maria Rodriguez had every reason not to care. Single mother. 2 jobs, an eviction notice tucked in her purse that she tried not to think about. Her daughter needed new shoes for school, and the electricity bill was already 2 months overdue. 17 cents might not seem like much to you, but when you're counting every penny to make rent, 17 cents is a decision. It's the difference between walking home or taking the bus on a rainy day. Yet she gave it anyway. The man in the baseball cap continued shopping, but his mind wasn't on groceries anymore. He'd spent 30 years reviewing restaurants, critiquing 5-star establishments where 17 cents wouldn't even register as a rounding error. He'd dined with celebrities, judged international culinary competitions, written books about food and hospitality. But when was the last time he'd witnessed genuine kindness without expectation of reward? He thought about the restaurants he'd visited that week. The maitre d' who barely looked up from the reservation book, the server who smiled only when she thought he might be someone important. The chef who emerged from the kitchen only for guests he deemed worthy of his time. And here was Maria, making $12 an hour, giving away money she couldn't afford to lose. He finished his shopping but didn't leave. Instead, he sat in his car in the parking lot, watching through the store window as Maria continued her shift. He saw her help a mother wrangle 3 young children. He watched her carefully bag groceries for a man with trembling hands, making sure the bread wouldn't get crushed. What makes someone kind when the world has given them every reason to be bitter? 3 days passed before the man returned. This time, he wasn't wearing the baseball cap. He'd traded his casual clothes for a simple button-down shirt and slacks. Nothing fancy. Nothing that would make him stand out in a small neighborhood grocery store. He got in Maria's line again, even though 2 other registers were open with no wait. Find everything okay? Maria asked, not recognizing him from earlier in the week. I did. Thank you. He paused as she scanned his items. I was here the other day. You helped an elderly woman who was short on change. Maria's hand slowed for just a moment. Was he going to complain? Some customers got angry about delays, even small ones. I'm sorry if that held up the line. No, he interrupted gently. I wanted to thank you. She looked up then, really looked at him. There was something familiar about his eyes, though she couldn't place where she'd seen him before. It was nothing, she said, returning to scanning. We all need help sometimes. We all need help sometimes. Such simple words. Yet how many of us live by them? He paid for his groceries, exact change this time, and started to leave. Then he turned back. What time do you get off work? Maria's guard went up immediately. She'd dealt with enough uncomfortable customer interactions to be wary. Why? I'd like to offer you a job. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge to everything Maria thought she knew about how the world worked. You know that feeling when something seems too good to be true? Maria felt it now, standing in the grocery store break room, holding the business card the man had given her. Jonathan Chen, food critic, publisher, Taste and Truth magazine. She'd Googled him on her phone using the store's spotty Wi-Fi. The images that loaded slowly showed a different man than the one who'd stood in her checkout line. Award ceremonies, television appearances, a best-selling book about the soul of hospitality. "I don't understand," she'd told him. "I'm not a chef. I've never worked in a restaurant." "That's exactly why I want to hire you," Jonathan had replied. He explained his vision, a new restaurant concept, not another place obsessed with molecular gastronomy or Instagram-worthy presentations. A restaurant built on a radical idea, genuine kindness as the foundation of hospitality. "I can teach anyone to carry a plate or take an order," he'd said. "I can't teach what you did for that woman." Maria thought about her daughter sleeping on her cousin's couch because their apartment had black mold the landlord refused to fix. She thought about the community college classes she'd dropped out of when her mother got sick. She thought about every door that had closed in her face. Was this really a door opening? The pay would start at $60,000 a year, Jonathan had said, watching her face carefully. Full benefits, flexible hours to accommodate your daughter's schedule. 60,000. The number might as well have been $1 million. Maria made $24,000 between both her jobs, and that was in a good year. "Why me?" she'd asked, because she had to know. "You could hire anyone." Jonathan's answer would change everything. 30 years ago, I was that elderly woman. Jonathan's words filled the small break room with the weight of untold story. Maria sat down, forgetting she only had 10 minutes left on her break. "Not literally," he continued, "but I was broke, hungry, too proud to ask for help but desperate enough to count pennies in grocery store lines." He told her about arriving in New York with nothing but ambition and a notebook full of food writing nobody wanted to publish. About sleeping in a 24-hour diner, ordering just coffee and making it last all night. About the winter he survived on day-old bread and bruised fruit from a sympathetic grocery clerk. "One day I was 17 cents short on a can of soup. 17 cents. He smiled at the synchronicity. The cashier, an older woman named Grace, paid it without hesitating. Didn't make a big deal of it. Just said, "We all need help sometimes." The same words Maria had used. "I promised myself that if I ever made it, I'd pay it forward. Not just the 17 cents, but the kindness, the dignity she let me keep." He'd kept that promise in many ways over the years. Anonymous donations, generous tips, mentoring young writers. But lately, he'd been feeling disconnected from why he'd started writing about food in the first place. "I've reviewed 1,000 restaurants," he said, given out stars like they were stickers in a kindergarten class, but somewhere along the way I forgot that hospitality isn't about perfection. It's about humanity. "Do you ever feel like you've lost sight of what really matters?" "Your new restaurant," Maria said slowly. "What would it be like?" Jonathan's eyes lit up. "Imagine a place where the service comes from the heart, where every employee is hired not for their resume but for their character, where kindness isn't trained, it's genuine." It sounded impossible. It sounded beautiful. Change is terrifying when you've lived your whole life one paycheck away from disaster. Maria stood outside the address Jonathan had given her, staring up at an old building in a neighborhood that straddled the line between forgotten and rediscovered. The windows were covered with brown paper, but she could hear construction sounds from inside. "You came," Jonathan said, appearing in the doorway. He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt covered in dust. "I wasn't sure you would." Neither was she. She'd barely slept the night before, making lists of everything that could go wrong. What if she failed? What if she embarrassed herself? What if this was all some elaborate scam or cruel joke? But what if it wasn't? Inside, the space was a skeleton of possibilities. Exposed beams and brick walls. Chalk marks on the floor indicating where tables would go. A kitchen being assembled piece by piece. "It needs work," Jonathan admitted. "But I believe the best things always do." He introduced her to the small team he'd already assembled. A former social worker who would manage the front of house. A chef who'd walked away from a Michelin-starred restaurant because he was tired of feeding only the wealthy. A bartender who'd been sober for 10 years and wanted to create a space where people could gather without alcohol being the focus. Each had a story. Each had chosen kindness in a world that rewarded cold efficiency. "We're calling it the gathering table," Jonathan explained, "because everyone needs a place where they belong." Maria watched the chef testing recipes, using ingredients from local farms and vendors who usually couldn't afford to eat at the restaurants they supplied. She saw the plans for a sliding scale payment system. Those who could afford more would subsidize meals for those who couldn't. Was this what hope looked like? A dusty construction site and a group of people foolish enough to believe kindness could be a business model? The next 6 months passed in a blur of controlled chaos. Maria learned things she never imagined she'd need to know. The difference between a soup spoon and a dessert spoon. How to properly decant wine. The art of reading a table's mood before approaching. But more importantly, she learned to trust her instincts. "You have a gift," the former social worker, Diana, told her one afternoon. "You see people. Really see them." It was true. Maria noticed when a guest was celebrating secretly, trying not to draw attention. She sensed when someone was dining alone, not by choice but by circumstance. She recognized the look of someone counting pennies in their head while studying the menu, and she acted on what she saw: a discreet birthday dessert for the woman celebrating alone, a comfortable table by the window for the elderly man who watched the world go by, an accidentally forgotten charge for the young couple who ordered only appetizers and water. Jonathan watched it all, taking his own mental notes. The restaurant hadn't even opened yet, but word was already spreading. Not through traditional marketing, but through the contractors and vendors who'd worked on the space. They talked about the unusual interview process. Instead of asking about experience, Jonathan asked about moments of kindness. They mentioned the staff meals where everyone, from the dishwasher to the owner, ate together. Have you ever been part of something that felt bigger than yourself? 3 weeks before opening, they did a test run. Invited guests only, mostly people from the neighborhood. The elderly woman from the grocery store was there, sitting at a table with her daughter who'd flown in from another state after hearing about Maria's kindness. "I never forgot you," she told Maria, gripping her hands. "I went home that day and cried, not from sadness but because someone saw me. Do you understand? Someone saw me as a person, not just an inconvenience." Maria understood. She understood completely. Opening night arrived with all the fanfare of a whispered secret. No PR campaign, no celebrity endorsements, no influencers posing with their meals. Just a simple sign on the door. "Welcome to the gathering table. Come as you are." The first customer was a construction worker who'd helped build the kitchen. He ordered the special, a simple roasted chicken that the chef had perfected over weeks of practice. When he went to pay, he found a note with his bill. "Thank you for building our dream. This one's on us." Word spread through the neighborhood like warmth from a fire. The teacher who brought her elderly mother for Sunday dinner. The single father who discovered the children's menu was priced at whatever parents could afford. The teenage girl who was hired on the spot after she returned a wallet she'd found on the sidewalk outside. But not everyone understood. Some customers, accustomed to a different kind of dining, were confused by the lack of pretense. Where was the extensive wine list? Why didn't the servers recite their names and favorite menu items? Why did the chef spend time talking to a child about how pasta was made instead of staying hidden in the kitchen? "This isn't how restaurants work," one particularly difficult customer announced loudly, upset that his request for a table by the window couldn't be accommodated because it was reserved for regular customers, an elderly couple celebrating 50 years of marriage. Maria approached him with the same calm she'd developed at the grocery store. "You're right," she said. "This isn't how most restaurants work. But maybe that's exactly why we need places like this. What would happen if we stopped accepting how things work and started imagining how they could work?" The man left, but not before Maria quietly comped his meal. "Nobody should leave here feeling unseen," she told Jonathan later. He made another note in the journal he'd been keeping since the day he met her. 3 months after opening, Jonathan published his review. He'd never reviewed a restaurant he was involved with before. The conflict of interest was obvious, the ethical lines blurred. But this wasn't really a review, it was a confession. "I've spent 30 years telling people where to eat," he wrote, "judging restaurants on their wine selections and thread counts, their molecular spheres and artisanal everything. I've helped create a culture where dining out became a performance, where hospitality became a transaction, where human connection was sacrificed for Instagram perfection." He wrote about Maria, about the 17 cents, about Grace, the cashier who'd helped him decades ago, about every moment of kindness that had been devalued in the pursuit of culinary excellence. The gathering table will never earn a Michelin star. The food, while delicious, isn't innovative. The service, while warm, doesn't follow traditional fine dining protocols. The decor is simple, the wine list modest, the price is designed for inclusion rather than exclusion. It is also the most important restaurant in America right now. The review went viral within hours. Not because people agreed, many didn't. Food critics accused Jonathan of sentimentality. Restaurant owners called it naive. Business analysts predicted the gathering table would fail within a year. But something else happened too. Messages poured in from around the world. A server in Tokyo who'd been fired for spending too long talking to a lonely customer. A chef in Paris who dreamed of cooking for people who couldn't afford his current restaurant. A dishwasher in Mumbai who was saving to open a place where dignity was the most important ingredient. Do you know what happens when one person's kindness gives others permission to be kind too? It spreads. Like ripples from a stone thrown in still water, it spreads. Success, Maria learned, was more complicated than failure. The gathering table was booked solid for 3 months out. News crews appeared daily. Food bloggers dissected every detail. The very attention Jonathan's review brought threatened to destroy what made the restaurant special. "We're losing something," Diana observed during a staff meeting. The original intimacy was harder to maintain when every table was filled with people hoping to witness the kindness they'd read about online. Some came as kindness tourists, performing generosity for their social media feeds. Others came to prove the concept wrong, looking for cracks in the facade. A few even came to take advantage, spinning hard luck stories to get free meals. Maria felt the weight of being a symbol when all she'd wanted was to be helpful. The 17 cents had become mythology, repeated and embellished until she barely recognized her own story. "I didn't do it to become famous," she told Jonathan one evening after a particularly difficult shift. A customer had berated her for not remembering their name, saying a truly kind server would remember everyone who'd ever eaten there. "I know," Jonathan said. "That's exactly why it mattered. They made changes, instituted a reservation system that kept half the tables for walk-ins from the neighborhood, created quiet hours for elderly customers who felt overwhelmed by the crowds, started a program where they closed one night a week to serve only those who couldn't afford to pay. Remember this: true kindness doesn't scale easily. It's not a business model or a marketing strategy. It's a choice, made again and again, especially when it's hard." Maria thought about quitting more than once. The pressure, the scrutiny, the impossibility of being perfectly kind every moment of every day. But then she'd see a regular customer. The construction worker who now brought his whole crew every Friday. The elderly woman from the grocery store who had her own regular table. The teenage girl who'd found not just a job but a family. They needed the gathering table to exist. And maybe, Maria realized, so did she. A year passed. Then 2. The headlines faded. The tourists moved on to the next viral sensation, but the gathering table remained. It had evolved into something even Jonathan hadn't envisioned, a community center disguised as a restaurant, the place where the neighborhood held meetings, where teenagers did homework at quiet tables in the afternoon, where elderly residents knew they'd always find company and conversation along with their meal. Maria had been promoted to general manager, though titles meant little in a place where the dishwasher's opinion was valued as much as the owner's. Her daughter, now in high school, did her homework at the bar most evenings, surrounded by an extended family of staff and regulars. The sliding scale payment system had inspired others. 3 restaurants in other cities had adopted similar models. A movement was growing, quietly, without fanfare. Establishments choosing community over profit margins, connection over efficiency. But the most profound changes were the invisible ones. The regular customer who'd started volunteering at a food bank after seeing how the gathering table operated. The wealthy businessman who'd restructured his company's pay scale after a conversation with Maria about living wages. The countless small acts of kindness that rippled out from that original 17 cents. Jonathan documented it all in his journal, which had grown into multiple volumes. He was writing a book, he told Maria. But it wasn't really about the restaurant. "What's it about then?" she asked. "It's about what happens when we remember that every interaction is a chance to affirm someone's humanity. It's about 17 cents and how it can change the world." Is that too much to claim? That 17 cents can change the world? Consider this. Every kindness creates a memory. Every memory influences a choice. Every choice shapes a life. Every life touches other lives. Where does it end? It doesn't. That's the beautiful, terrifying truth of human connection. The elderly woman from the grocery store passed away on a quiet Tuesday morning in spring. Maria heard about it from the woman's daughter, who came to the restaurant to deliver the news in person. "She wanted you to have this," the daughter said, handing Maria a small envelope. Inside was 17 cents, a dime, a nickel, and 2 pennies, taped to a piece of paper. The handwriting was shaky but clear. "For the next person who needs it." Maria stood in the restaurant she'd helped build, holding those coins, and understood something profound about the nature of kindness. It's not a debt to be repaid. It's a gift to be passed forward. It doesn't diminish when shared, it multiplies. She thought about Jonathan, who'd taken his success and used it to create opportunities for others. About Grace, the cashier who'd helped him long ago, whose kindness was still rippling through time. About every person who'd chosen compassion when the world gave them permission to be indifferent. The gathering table had succeeded, not because it had reimagined the restaurant business, but because it had remembered what business was supposed to be about in the first place: serving one another. That evening, Maria kept those 17 cents in her pocket. She knew exactly what to do with them. Somewhere, someone would come up short. Someone would need not just the money, but the message that they were seen, valued, worthy of kindness. And when that moment came, Maria would be ready. What about you? What 17 cents are you carrying in your pocket? What small kindness are you waiting to share? What life might you change with a gesture so simple that others might not even notice? The truth is, we're all just 17 cents away from making a difference. The question isn't whether you have enough to give. The question is whether you'll recognize the moment when it arrives. Because it will arrive. It always does. Like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. This channel is for those who believe in the power of small acts to